Collision. Course Olivia. Jensen adjusted her navy blazer and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear as she surveyed the crowded gallery. The Marine Conservation Society's annual exhibition was in full swing, and as one of the lead researchers, she felt obligated to mingle, though she'd much rather be back at her lab analyzing samples from the recent expedition. "There you are!" Prisha, her colleague, appeared beside her with 2 flutes of champagne. "Stop hiding in corners. This is a celebration of your work, too." "I'm not hiding," Olivia protested, accepting the drink. "I'm observing. It's what scientists do." Prisha rolled her eyes. "Well, observe some humans for a change. The coral reefs will survive without your attention for one evening." As they moved through the exhibition, Olivia found herself drawn into a conversation circle discussing the newly installed sound installation meant to replicate underwater acoustics. A tall man with tousled copper hair was gesturing expressively, his voice carrying an authoritative tone that immediately grated on her nerves. "The composition completely misrepresents the actual resonance patterns of marine environments," he was saying. "It's aesthetically pleasing but scientifically inaccurate." Olivia bristled. She had consulted on that installation. "And you're an expert on marine acoustics?" she challenged, stepping forward. The man turned, his hazel eyes briefly registering surprise before settling into amused confidence. "On acoustics, yes. I'm a composer who specializes in natural soundscapes. Well, as someone who actually spends time underwater recording those sounds, I can assure you the installation is far more accurate than you're giving it credit for," Olivia countered. "Perhaps to an untrained ear," he replied with a slight shrug. "But there's a difference between documentation and artistic interpretation. The harmonic structure here prioritizes human emotional response over acoustic fidelity." The circle had gone quiet, watching their exchange like a tennis match. "That's exactly the problem with artists co-opting scientific work," Olivia said, feeling her cheeks flush. "You think your perception matters more than reality. Some things aren't meant to be interpreted, they simply are." The man raised an eyebrow. "Science without interpretation is just data collection. Your research papers interpret data to tell a story too, don't they?" Before she could respond, Prisha intervened, smoothly changing the subject. The man, whose name Olivia never caught, drifted away from the group shortly after, and she tried to put the irritating encounter out of her mind. 3 days later, Olivia wheeled her suitcase up to the 3rd-floor apartment in Westlake Heights. After months of temporary housing near the research center, she'd finally found a promising 2-bedroom through Room Match, a service that paired compatible roommates based on living habits and preferences. The rent was reasonable, the location ideal. And according to her profile match, her new roommate kept similar hours and valued quiet. She unlocked the door with her new key and stepped inside. The apartment was bright and airy, with large windows overlooking the city park. She dropped her bag in the entryway and walked toward the kitchen, already planning how to organize her collection of teas. The sound of a piano melody stopped her, cold. It was coming from the 2nd bedroom, the door slightly ajar. Olivia frowned. Her roommate's profile hadn't mentioned musical instruments. As she rounded the corner into the kitchen, the music abruptly stopped. Footsteps approached and a familiar voice called out, "Hello? Is that the new roommate?" The copper-haired man from the gallery appeared in the doorway, a coffee mug in hand. Recognition dawned in his eyes at the same moment realization crashed over her. "You!" they both said simultaneously. He recovered first, extending his hand with a wry smile. "Julian Archer. I believe we've met, though not properly introduced." Olivia stared at his outstretched hand, her mind racing through the implications. She was going to be living with the pretentious composer who had dismissed her work. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. Discordant notes. The first week of cohabitation felt like navigating a minefield. Olivia and Julian established an unspoken system of polite avoidance, their interactions limited to brief nods and clipped pleasantries. The apartment, despite its spacious layout, seemed to shrink around them. "Coffee's fresh," Julian would announce before retreating to his room when Olivia emerged bleary-eyed at 5:30 a.m. "Mail's on the counter," she would mutter when passing him in the hallway, careful not to make eye contact. Their divergent schedules provided natural separation. Olivia left at dawn for the research center while Julian worked from home, composing commissioned pieces and teaching virtual lessons. But evenings brought unavoidable collision as they navigated shared spaces with awkward choreography. On Thursday night, Olivia sat cross-legged on the living room couch, surrounded by research. Papers on coral bleaching patterns when piano music began filtering through Julian's closed door. Initially, she tried to ignore it, focusing on her data analysis, but the complex melodies kept pulling at her attention. After 30 minutes, the same passage repeated for the 7th time, each iteration slightly different but growing progressively louder. Olivia marched to his door and knocked sharply. Julian opened it, headphones around his neck. "Yes? It's almost midnight," she said, arms crossed. "Some of us have early mornings." "I'm wearing headphones," he pointed out. "Your keyboard is still making noise. I can hear every note." Julian frowned. "I need to finish this passage tonight. It's for a documentary soundtrack due tomorrow. And I need to finish analyzing these bleaching patterns for a presentation tomorrow," she countered. "We agreed on quiet hours after 11. "Actually," Julian leaned against the doorframe, "your profile said you were a night owl who doesn't mind ambient noise. Mine specified creative professional with irregular hours." Olivia's mouth tightened. "Playing the same melody 18 different ways isn't ambient noise. It's psychological torture." 17, he corrected with infuriating precision. "And I'm trying to capture the exact moment when a manta ray breaks the surface of the water. It needs to convey both grace and power." Despite herself, Olivia's scientific mind engaged. "Manta rays don't break the surface like dolphins. They glide just below, occasionally lifting a wingtip. The movement is more horizontal than vertical." Julian's expression shifted from annoyance to interest. "Show me." Before she knew it, Olivia was in his room, demonstrating the fluid, wave-like motion with her arms while Julian watched intently. He turned to his keyboard, played a rolling, arpeggiated phrase that descended rather than ascended, and looked at her questioningly. "That's closer," she admitted reluctantly. For 15 minutes, they worked through the movement pattern, translating it into musical phrases. When Julian finally captured something that made Olivia nod in recognition, a small silence fell between them. "Thank you," he said simply. "I'll use headphones with the volume lower for the rest of the night." The next morning, Olivia found a paper cup of premium coffee, not their usual kitchen brew, waiting on the counter with a note. "Peace offering. It's from Elysian Roasters." She couldn't help but notice it was prepared exactly how she liked. One sugar, splash of almond milk. Their truce was short-lived. The weekend brought new friction when Julian's elaborate cooking experiments left the kitchen looking like a culinary war zone, just as Olivia needed to prepare samples for Monday's lab work. "Do you actually need all 17 of these bowls?" she demanded, gesturing at the countertop covered in various ingredients. "I'm testing variations for a dinner party next weekend," Julian explained, whisking something that smelled surprisingly wonderful. "You're welcome to join, by the way." "I'd rather catalog plankton samples," she muttered, trying to create a small workspace for herself. "That can be arranged too," he replied with a straight face, "though I don't recommend them as an appetizer." The unexpected humor caught her off guard, and she almost smiled before catching herself. Their living arrangement was purely practical. She didn't need to find him charming. The real breaking point came when Olivia discovered Julian had rearranged their shared bathroom cabinet to accommodate his surprisingly extensive collection of hair products. "This is not what equal space means," she confronted him in the living room, where he sat working on his laptop. Julian looked up, fingers paused over the keys. Your two moisturizers were rattling around in all that empty space. It's more efficient this way. You can't just reorganize shared spaces without consulting me. I left you a note, he pointed out. Optimized storage configuration is not a consultation. Julian sighed, removing his reading glasses. Olivia, we're both adults. Is this really worth arguing about? It's about respect for boundaries, she insisted. Just like when you moved my research books to make room for your music theory texts on the living room shelf. They're organized by subject now instead of being scattered everywhere. They were organized by frequency of use. Julian ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in a way that Olivia refused to find endearing. Look, I'm trying to make this work, but you seem determined to find fault with everything I do. Maybe because you keep acting like your way is automatically better. At least I'm trying to improve our shared space instead of just tolerating it. The argument ended with both retreating to their respective rooms, doors closing a bit too firmly. Later that night, Olivia heard Julian quietly returning her books to their original positions, and she felt a confusing mix of vindication and guilt. The next morning, she deliberately left the bathroom cabinet in his new arrangement and pretended not to notice the slight smile on his face when he emerged from the shower. A pattern emerged. Conflict, temporary resolution, tentative adjustment. Two headstrong individuals learning, with great reluctance, to bend without breaking. Neither willing to admit that perhaps, in some small way, they were beginning to find the other's presence less insufferable than they had initially feared. Beneath the surface, the sound of cascading water jolted Olivia from deep sleep. For a moment, she thought she was back on the research vessel during a storm, until she registered Julian's voice shouting her name from the hallway. Olivia! Wake! Up! The bathroom pipe burst! She stumbled out of bed to find water pouring from the ceiling in the hallway, already soaking the carpet. Julian stood in boxer shorts and a t-shirt, trying to contain the spreading puddle with towels. The super isn't answering, he said, phone pressed to his ear. We need to find the main water valve. Fully awake now, Olivia ran to the kitchen, remembering the building orientation. It should be under the sink. Together they managed to shut off the water, but the damage was already significant. Water had seeped into both bedrooms, threatening. Julian's keyboard equipment and Olivia's research materials. My manuscripts, Julian exclaimed, rushing to move stacks of handwritten music sheets from his desk, where water was dripping from the ceiling. Olivia immediately moved to help him, carefully handling the pages. Where should I put these? Living room table. It's dry there. He was already unplugging electronic equipment, face tense with worry. Once his room was secured, Julian followed her to hers, where she was frantically moving boxes of scientific journals and field notebooks. The ones on the bottom shelf are irreplaceable, she explained as he grabbed a stack. Field notes from the Maldives expedition, before the northern reef was lost. They worked in seamless coordination, communicating in brief, efficient exchanges as they salvaged what mattered most to each other. By the time the maintenance crew arrived 2 hours later, they had created a mountain of wet towels and saved their most precious possessions. Exhausted, they collapsed onto the living room couch, surrounded by the strange combination of musical, scores, and marine research, now safe but disorganized. Thank you, Olivia said quietly. Especially for helping with my research materials. Julian nodded, running a hand through his damp hair. Same to you. Some of those compositions represent months of work. I noticed the dates, she admitted. You're incredibly prolific. And I noticed your field notation system. Impressively methodical. An awkward silence settled between them, both suddenly aware they were sitting close together in their night clothes, the adrenaline of emergency response fading into something more uncertain. Julian cleared his throat. I should make coffee. It's going to be a long day of cleanup. While he was in the kitchen, Olivia began organizing his scattered music sheets, noticing a folder labeled Children's Symphony Initiative Volunteer Program. Inside were simple compositions clearly designed for beginners, alongside photographs of Julian teaching a diverse group of children. When he returned with 2 mugs, she couldn't help asking, "You teach music to kids?" He looked momentarily embarrassed. "At the community center downtown, every Saturday. But you're a professional composer. Don't you have better things to do with your weekends?" Julian's expression softened. "Music gave me a voice when I had none. After my mother died, I stopped speaking for almost a year. My elementary school music teacher noticed I would hum responses instead of talking. She gave me access to the school piano during lunch breaks." He shrugged. "I'm just paying it forward." Olivia studied him, recalibrating her perception. "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect? That I spend my weekends critiquing underwater sound installations?" His smile took the sting from the words. She laughed despite herself. "Something like that." Later that afternoon, as they worked side by side moving furniture away from the damp carpet, Julian paused beside Olivia's collection of framed photographs. "Is this your conservation team?" he asked, pointing to a group shot on a research vessel. "Yes, from the Caribbean expedition last year." She joined him, pointing to a vibrant coral formation in another photo. "That's what we're fighting to save. Healthy reef systems are disappearing at an alarming rate." Julian studied the images with genuine interest. "I've never seen colors like that in person. Most people haven't. That's part of the problem. People don't protect what they never experience." She hesitated, then added, "My team is hosting a fundraiser next month. An immersive exhibition with 360-degree projection of reef environments. We're still looking for the right soundtrack." Their eyes met in a moment of mutual recognition. An olive branch extended, an opportunity offered. "I might know someone who could help with that," Julian said with a small smile. The maintenance crew worked through the evening, setting up industrial fans to dry the carpet. With both bedrooms damp and noisy, they silently agreed to camp in the living room, Julian taking the couch while Olivia set up an air mattress. In the dimness, with the white noise of fans masking their voices, conversation came easier than it had in the 3 weeks they'd lived together. "Why marine biology?" Julian asked, his voice floating through the darkness. Olivia stared at the ceiling, considering. "I grew up in a desert. The ocean seemed like magic. This vast, mysterious world I'd only seen in books. When I finally saw it at 17, I knew I'd found my purpose." She paused. "What about you? Why composition?" "I hear music in everything," he replied simply. "The world speaks in patterns and rhythms most people never notice. I just translate what I hear." For the first time, Olivia recognized the similarity in their passions, both dedicated to capturing and preserving something profound that others overlooked. As sleep finally claimed her, she realized the distance between artist and scientist might not be as vast as she had always believed. Shifting tides. The apartment took on a different atmosphere after the flood incident. The invisible walls between their separate lives began to dissolve, replaced by a tentative curiosity about each other's worlds. Olivia found herself lingering in the kitchen when Julian practiced, her ear catching the evolution of phrases as he refined them. Julian, in turn, began asking questions about her research, displaying a surprising aptitude for scientific concepts. "It's all patterns," he explained when she remarked on his quick understanding of choral reproduction cycles. "Like musical structures, but with different notation. Their shared spaces transformed gradually." The living room bookshelf now displayed an integrated collection. Marine biology texts nestled alongside music theory volumes, no longer segregated by ownership. The kitchen whiteboard featured both Olivia's research deadlines and Julian's composition. Milestones, a merged calendar of their professional lives. One evening, Olivia returned home to find Julian intensely focused at his keyboard, headphones on, fingers dancing across the keys. She set down her bags quietly, not wanting to disturb him, but he sensed her presence and turned. "Perfect timing," he said, removing his headphones. "I was hoping to get your feedback on something." Surprised, Olivia approached as he gestured, for her to sit beside him on the piano bench. "It's for your exhibition," he explained, turning his laptop screen toward her. "I've been working with the underwater recordings you shared." He played a composition that made Olivia's breath catch. Somehow he had captured the essence of moving through a coral reef, the ambient hush of water, the rhythmic pulse of waves above, the delicate clicks and whirs of reef creatures in conversation. It wasn't merely accurate. It evoked the emotional experience of being surrounded by that fragile underwater metropolis. "Julian, this is—" She struggled to find words. "Not scientifically inaccurate," he suggested with a small smile. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "How did you—" "I listened," he said simply. "To the recordings, yes, but also to you when you talk about your work. The passion in your voice tells me as much about these environments as the data does." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the space between them. Recognition, respect, and something more complicated neither was ready to name. The night of the Marine Conservation fundraiser, Julian arrived early to help set up the sound system. Wearing a charcoal suit that Olivia had never seen before, he looked different from the casual composer who padded around their apartment in sock feet. "You clean up well," she remarked, suddenly self-conscious in her formal dress. A rare departure from her usual practical attire. "So do you," he replied, his gaze lingering. "Although I'm more impressed by what you've created here." The exhibition transformed the Natural History Museum's Grand Hall into an underwater wonderland. Projections covered walls, ceiling, and floor, creating the illusion of being submerged among vibrant coral formations. Julian's soundtrack completed the sensory experience, guiding visitors through the narrative of reef ecosystems, their beauty, their importance, and their peril. Throughout the evening, Olivia noticed Julian engaged in earnest conversations with her colleagues, asking insightful questions and listening intently to their answers. When her director, Dr. Hammond, delivered a passionate speech about funding needs for their conservation efforts, Julian was the first to approach with a donation. Modest by the standards of wealthier patrons, but significant given what she knew of his freelance composer's income. "Your roommate is not what I expected," Prisha commented, joining Olivia at the refreshment table. "Based on your initial complaints, I pictured some pretentious artiste with a scarf collection and superiority. Complex!" Olivia watched Julian across the room, animated as he discussed something with one of their marine acoustics specialists. "He's full of surprises," she admitted. The exhibition exceeded their fundraising goals, with Julian's soundtrack receiving particular praise for enhancing the emotional impact of the scientific presentation. As they packed up equipment late that night, Dr. Hammond pulled Olivia aside. "We've been offered a last-minute spot on the Palmer expedition to Antarctica," he said. 3 weeks studying impact of warming waters on the polar ecosystem. I want you to lead the field team." Olivia's excitement was immediate. This was a career-defining opportunity, but tempered by unexpected thoughts of the apartment, of unfinished conversations, of the strange new equilibrium she and Julian had found. "When would we leave?" she asked. 2 weeks from Tuesday. I need your answer by Monday." At home, she found Julian waiting up, a bottle of champagne chilling. "To celebrate your success," he explained, pouring 2 glasses. As they sat on their small balcony under the night sky, Olivia told him about the Antarctica opportunity, watching his expression carefully. "That's incredible," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "You have to go." "It's 3 weeks," she said, not sure why she was mentioning the duration. Julian nodded. "The apartment will still be here when you get back?" After a pause, he added more softly, "So will I." A week later, their roles reversed when Julian received news that the New York Philharmonic was considering his composition for their upcoming Modern Composers Showcase. The audition would require him to be in New York the same week as Olivia's departure for Antarctica. "This is what you've been working toward," she insisted when he seemed hesitant. "You can't miss this opportunity." The night before his flight to New York, Julian paced the apartment, second-guessing his arrangement choices, questioning his decision to submit the piece at all. "What if they hate it?" he asked, running hands through already disheveled hair. "What if I'm just a mediocre composer who should stick to documentary soundtracks and children's lessons?" Olivia had never seen him doubt himself before. The vulnerability transformed him from the confident artist who had irritated her at the gallery into someone much more human. "Play it for me again," she requested, sitting beside him at the keyboard. He did, his fingers expressing what words could not. Hope, fear, ambition, the bittersweet ache of pursuing a dream that might remain forever just beyond reach. When he finished, Olivia spoke with quiet certainty. "They would be fools not to recognize what you've created." Julian looked at her, surprise giving way to something warmer. "Thank you for saying that." "I'm not just saying it," she insisted. "I know the difference between good and extraordinary, Julian. Even in music." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, the gesture so gentle it almost undid her. "When did you become my biggest supporter?" "Probably around the same time you became mine," she admitted. They stayed up late into the night, Julian playing fragments of compositions, Olivia sharing stories of underwater discoveries. There was a new urgency to their exchange, both aware of the impending separation, neither quite ready to acknowledge why that mattered so much. In the morning, they would part ways, he to New York, she to final preparations for Antarctica, each carrying pieces of the other's world with them, transformed by a connection neither had sought, but both had somehow found. Harmonious depths. 3 weeks felt like an eternity. Olivia's expedition to Antarctica proved as groundbreaking as she had hoped, yielding critical data on the changing polar marine environment. Each night in her cramped berth aboard the research vessel, she composed detailed emails to Julian that she couldn't send due to limited satellite connectivity. Instead, she saved them, creating an unintentional journal of discoveries she wanted to share with him. Meanwhile, Julian's audition with the Philharmonic led to an unexpected opportunity. They commissioned a full orchestral piece for their spring season, requesting he remain in New York for collaborative development with their conductor. What was meant to be a 3-day trip stretched into 3 weeks. They maintained contact through sporadic messages when Olivia could connect to satellite internet, their communications brief but laden with unspoken significance. "Recording Emperor Penguin vocalizations today reminds me of your variations on diminished sevenths. Workshopping with principal violinist, he has your attention to detail. Send Penguin recordings, might incorporate into third movement." The apartment stood empty, a liminal space waiting to be reclaimed. When they finally returned, Julian arriving just hours before Olivia, a powerful coastal storm had knocked out power across much of the city. Julian was lighting the last candle when Olivia's key turned in the lock. She appeared in the doorway, backlit by the emergency lights in the hallway, her silhouette familiar yet somehow new. For a moment, neither spoke, the 3 weeks of separation crystallizing into a single breath of recognition. "Welcome home," Julian said finally, voice soft in the candlelit room. Olivia set down her bags, exhaustion giving way to something lighter as she took in the scene, candles on every surface, Julian's attempt at creating warmth in the darkened apartment. "You too," she replied. "How long has the power been out?" "Since this morning, apparently. Building manager says it could be tomorrow before it's restored." They gravitated to the living room where Julian had assembled a makeshift picnic. Non-perishable foods, bottled water, a bottle of wine. I thought you might be hungry after your flights, he explained, suddenly self-conscious. Olivia smiled, the first genuine smile after weeks of scientific focus. Starving, actually. They settled on the floor around the coffee table, candlelight, casting dancing shadows as they began the delicate process of reconnection. Initial conversation remained safe, his commission, her research findings, but as the wine diminished and the hour grew later, the dialogue deepened. I missed this place more than I expected, Olivia admitted, gesturing around the apartment that had once felt like contested territory. The apartment, or? Julian left the question unfinished. She met his gaze steadily. Not just the apartment. A comfortable silence settled between them, 3 weeks of separation dissolving in the quiet acknowledgement of what had been growing long before they parted. Something changed, Julian said finally. Between that first day when you found me, standing in the kitchen, and now, everything changed, Olivia agreed. My entire perception of you, for starters. Julian smiled. I believe you called me arrogant. You were arrogant, she insisted, but without heat. Or at least that's how you presented yourself. And you were judgmental. I prefer discerning, she countered with a small laugh. Tell me something real, Julian said suddenly, leaning forward. Something you haven't told anyone else. Olivia considered, swirling the last of her wine. I'm afraid I care more about my research than I'm capable of caring about people, she admitted. That I'll always choose the ocean over human connection. Julian didn't respond immediately, giving her words the weight they deserved. Is that why you've avoided relationships? Fear of having to choose? Partly, she acknowledged. Also because most people don't understand the devotion science requires. They see it as a job, not a calling. I understand devotion, Julian said quietly. When music is flowing through me, nothing else exists. It's not a choice, it's a necessity. Exactly, Olivia whispered, struck by the precision of his understanding. Your turn. Tell me something real. Julian set down his glass, his face serious in the flickering light. My compositions for the children's program? They're based on my mother's lullabies, the only music I remember from before she died. He hesitated. I keep trying to recreate the feeling of absolute safety those melodies gave me. I haven't succeeded yet. Olivia reached across the space between them, her fingers finding his in the darkness. Play one for me? Without separating their hands, Julian led her to the keyboard by the window. The digital piano wouldn't function without electricity, but he didn't need it. In the candlelight, he began to hum a gentle melody, his voice creating what his fingers could not. The simple tune carried a profound emotional weight, longing, remembrance, the bittersweet ache of preserving something precious through imperfect memory. When he finished, Olivia realized her cheeks were damp. That was beautiful, she whispered. It's unfinished, he said. I can never remember how it ends. Maybe it's not meant to end, she suggested. Maybe it's meant to evolve. Julian studied her face in the wavering light. When did you become so wise about music? Around the same time you became so insightful about marine ecosystems, she replied with a small smile. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows, but inside their apartment, truly theirs now, in a way it hadn't been before, they created a sanctuary of candlelight and confession. I have something for you, Julian said, retrieving a small package from his room. From New York. Olivia unwrapped it to find a delicate glass paperweight containing a perfect miniature coral reef, the craftsmanship extraordinary. It reminded me of how you see the world, he explained. The attention to detail, the recognition of beauty in complex systems. She ran her fingers over the smooth glass surface. It's perfect. I have something for you, too, she said, digging through her expedition bag. It's not as elegant, but... She handed him a small waterproof recorder. Emperor Penguin vocalizations. I thought they might inspire something. Julian held the device as if it were priceless. Thank you for thinking of me, even in Antarctica. I thought of you more than I expected to, she admitted. The candlelight caught the amber flecks in his eyes as he moved closer. I wrote an entire symphony thinking of you. Their first kiss felt like the resolution of a complex musical phrase, surprising yet inevitable, the perfect conclusion to a progression that had been building since that first contentious meeting at the gallery. When they separated, Julian traced the curve of her cheek with gentle fingers. I never thought I'd be grateful for Room Match's algorithm. Olivia laughed softly. We should send them a thank you note for their terrible compatibility assessment. Or perfect assessment, Julian countered. Perhaps they knew exactly what they were doing, that sometimes the people who challenge us most are the ones we need most. As the storm continued outside and candles burned low around them, Olivia and Julian remained wrapped in conversation and newfound closeness, two people who had begun as adversaries discovering they were, in fact, complementary parts of an unexpected harmony. Different melodies intertwining to create something richer than either could produce alone. In the morning, they would face practical questions about Julian's commission in New York and Olivia's ongoing research. But for now, in the intimate darkness of a powerless apartment, they allowed themselves to explore this fragile, beautiful connection. Proof that first impressions, like initial compositions, were merely rough drafts waiting to be refined into something truer and more enduring. The storm outside began to subside just as the first light of dawn illuminated their faces. Scientist and composer, observer and interpreter, two people who had found in each other the most unexpected and perfect of harmonies.